Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Corey Pelk. I'm Director of Member Services for SSDA, and today I have the dynamic duo of Marci and Brett McFadden who are going to be presenting for you today. Real quick before we start, just a couple of housekeeping things. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a little box for handouts. Feel free to grab that PDF in there. That's a download of the PowerPoint that you'll be seeing today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, everybody is muted, so we ask you to write your questions in the question box, and then Brett and Marci will answer them throughout the webinar. And with that, I'm going to make Marci the presenter, and then we're going to get this show on the road.
Did it pop up? Oh.
It was there.
Let me go to the screen. Good?
No, you had it, and then it disappeared.
Ah.
There you go.
And then the PowerPoint went away. I had it all ready to roll too. Here we go.
The fun part.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for letting us take an hour of your time just to present to you just about communications and just how to just communicate budgets during these really challenging times. I'm Marci McFadden. I work at the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, and I think I've had the pleasure of speaking with some of you during some other SSDA events and conferences, and I've worked at both the county office and also the district office, and we're going through the same exact things you all are going through. And so hopefully we'll leave you with some things today that you can use, deal without guilt, and we're open to answer questions and serve as a resource. And I'll turn it over to Brett to talk.
Hi, thanks again. Honored to be here, and I'll be following what Marci guides us along with, because I'm a good partner and a good husband, right? Always listen to you. Do what you tell me to do.
Yes, for those of you that don't know us, we actually we're both married and we both work in school districts, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. But during these times, it's actually a good thing because we really can collaborate and come up with it, just really bounce things off each other, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our stakeholders and our district. So with that, we'll jump right in. So today we're going to cover just quickly, we're going to just talk to you about what, the next 2 fiscal years are going to look like, and just give you some practical tools, a game plan of how you can implement, prepare now as you go into 2021, how you can prepare your 2021 budget, and then just generally how you can prepare for the uncertain. We told you who we are. So if you we're going to present a lot of stuff today, but if anything, these are hopefully some of the things and strategies that we're going to leave you with. It's just the power of threes and the importance of getting talking points out there and using the power of three, but then also not letting perfect stand in the way of good, and that some communication is better than none at all. And then we're going to leave you with like a resource tool on how you can create some of those messages. I will tell you, in my district, we've had to go through various budget cuts. One of them a couple years ago, we had to cut $5 million, and we spent a lot of time strategizing leading up to that and communicating. And I really feel like that helped us and allowed us to make the cuts with not a lot of public outcry. Of course, we had some, but I feel like, as I said, some communication is better than none. Brett, did you want to add on, or do you want to just jump into this?
Yeah, I'll just jump into this. So as we sort of just create a baseline for this webinar, okay, no problem at all. This was, if the average small school district in the state of California, probably 65–70% of us, this was our financial picture before the pandemic happened. So modest revenue increases, we hit our LCFF targets, but yet we were sort of saddled with these huge fixed costs, STRS, PERS, rising special ed costs, our LCAP expenditures and such that continue to cost. And that was our financial picture even before things hit. For my district, for instance, we were okay for 2, perhaps maybe 3 years, but we did see, we saw problems and challenges out on the horizon. You can go to the next slide. So with the onset of the pandemic, our current problems are pushed forward now to next year, and then they're made worse because of the pending doom. In last week's SSDA webinar, we focused on negotiations and planning and building your budget tools. And so this is somewhat of the same thing, but last week we sort of laid out 3 scenarios that school districts should be planning for. We know we're going to get hit with major expenditure, or actually revenue reductions. How much, how long, that's uncertain, but we can probably guess and safely guess that our problem is 2021, and then probably we'll see some remaining challenges going into 21, 22. You know, I was listening to public radio this morning, and you know, the number of unemployment claims now is up to 25 million nationwide. And I think probably they were 2, maybe 3 weeks out, that the potential for between 20 to 25% of our entire workforce in this country being out of work or somehow underemployed is remarkable. I mean, that's not just mild recession, that's not recession, that's depression level statistics. And so there's just, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see any way that public education in California skates through this at all, when our funding is directly tied to per capita personal income. So what we listed here is that our best case scenario, and probably the scenario that we're at least told to plan for after the quasi so-called May revise, and although the May revise won't be able to tell us much until after the July 15th tax extension date and figures come in afterwards. But maybe our best case scenario looking at next year is flat funding with no COLA. But that's probably not likely. We'll probably be faced with some sort of mid-year reductions going into 2021.
So with that in mind, I think one of the biggest things that you want to try to do as you're preparing your budgets and just the strategy and the difficult decisions you have to make ahead, is just to start also strategizing simultaneously about like what it is that you want to communicate. Setting that tone, because you want to gain support if you can. You want to dispel myths. And bottom line is, if you're not telling your story, someone else will. And I know some of you have probably seen this slide. If I've spoken, if you attended some of the other SSDA events, but I will tell you this is so critical, and I'll tell you why. And this is a real life example that happened to me last night. I know in our district, I mean, I know in a lot of your small districts, you don't have the luxury of having someone like me full-time doing your communications, but that's okay, because some of the stuff we're going to leave you with is you're going to be able to steal without guilt. You can reach out to us and ask us for help, but I'm going to give you a live example of a district that has a full-time PEIO that has twice the size ADA as us. And I was just happened to be texting my good friend who sits on the board. I'm like, hey, just thinking of you. And I happened to be watching her board meeting online, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are going through, like, they had to cut like 35 classified. And she's like, help, I need talking points. What do you got? And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, are you serious? And she said, yes. So I was typing her some stuff, which I'm going to show you some examples later, a couple slides down. But you just want to be prepared. You don't want to be at your board meeting asking someone, give me some talking points quick. You want to be able to simultaneously create some of that narrative before you're at a board meeting, before you get hit hard. So it's just so important to really think about what your communication messages are going to be simultaneously along with the budget message. As you're thinking about your messages, who are your audiences? You see here, you have a lot of internal audiences, you have external audiences. And I think one of the biggest things that we overlook, and that sometimes we don't, we always take it for granted, is of our internal. So your staff. I know whenever we're communicating, the first and foremost, obviously leadership's talking, we're working with our board of trustees, our management team, and then also our unions. But the second thing that I go out and do is I make sure all of our employees know what's going on. And again, even if it's like putting together a quick like letter or email to them, doing like a Q&A session, you really, really want to let your employees know what's going on, because you want to keep up that morale. Brett, do you want to jump in on this slide?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. We don't want to spend, I'm going to go kind of quick on the tactical stuff because we want to give you real life examples, but you feel free to, reach out to us after, ask some questions.
One suggestion that we have for folks is, if you haven't done so already, develop your fingertip facts. These are just things that we all should know. Now, honestly, I have fingertip facts, but I actually mine are written down into a document that I keep handy because most of the stuff I can't keep all in my head. If you've been in your district for more than a year or so, most of this will just come naturally. But this is the sort of the facts and figures you're going to need to know in order to engage in various communications and conversations that you're going to have over the next 3 to 6 months.
And one of the other things too, and I don't think I see it on here, but is the administrators. Like, this is the thing that I saw last night that this board member was getting hit on. They unfortunately were cutting classified staff at the same time, where they were bringing 2 assistant superintendent cabinet level contracts for renewal. So they were getting hit hard, like, you have too many management, you're too top heavy. So just knowing the percentages of that and dispelling those myths and knowing what you would be saying ahead of time, even if it's 1, 2, 3 talking points, at least you're able to say something instead of being silent on the fact if you're caught flat-footed somewhere. Brett was talking about just having these fingertip facts. This is just an example of something as you're going into next year. We're going to be doing one for our district, an updated one, and I can share that with you. This is an old one that he did at Campbell Union High School District when he was there, but it's basic information to help tell a story and paint a picture of what your budget is. You can see there's some narrative here, but then on this page, on the right-hand side, is this where the fingertip facts are, some of them?
Last page, part 2.
More budgety stuff, but where the money spent. This is a good, doing a pie chart, something like this, so you can show like how much money is spent at, for example, certificated salaries, classified salaries, management, which is a small piece of the pie. But then the fingertip facts are all back here, and that you want to have available. And now this is a fancy document, sure. So, and when we said earlier, don't let perfect stand in the way of good, you can even have it on a 1-page, Word document with your logo on top, just so you have it available for yourself and for the public to know. But as we're redoing ours this year, I'm happy to share my templates with you. I'm going to be working on it over this summer, but I think it's really important, especially as you're going into next year, to have something like this available.
And Marci, can you scroll back up to part 1? Yeah, and so I would emphasize to folks on the right-hand side, where, right there, is definitely know your cost centers, because you're going to get hit up with, if you're looking at program reductions, staffing reductions, or anything like that, you're definitely going to get hit up with, what are you spending on administrators, superintendents, what's your salary, those types of things, how much is spent on other areas. So definitely know that pie chart and have that handy.
And then the other thing that you might want to do is, prior to COVID, our district went to impasse. We were at impasse because with our certificated bargaining unit, and unfortunately, they were saying stuff, and obviously a lot of times districts shy away and not say anything, but they put me at the table and I was communicating out every step of the way, obviously factual, but just also dispelling myths. And what we understood and what we were starting to see is that obviously even our employees and the average person doesn't understand like school district budgets and so forth. So we were about to work with our CBO and just do a small cute town hall, an hour-long session, and putting together like 7 to 10 little PowerPoint slides with stuff like this on it. Where does our money go? That type of thing, and then make ourselves available for Q&A. So I highly recommend, we're going to get into this a little later, but you have some time on your side, and we'll talk to you a little bit about what that town hall could look like.
Okay, so one thing, this is an example of, when we present our budgets. Now, I've, been at this for a little bit, both as a former CBO and then now 2 years as a superintendent. But I will just generally say, I think we in our profession, we do a horrible job of presenting our budgets and explaining that. So we can't get around the fact that there are certain documents that have to go into our budget actions, like at first interim, second interim, July adoption, all of that. You can't get around it. You need your standards and criterion. You're going to need your multi-years and such. And reading that stuff is like going to an insurance convention. It's Byzantine. It doesn't make sense. Even for us in finance, it doesn't. It's not laid out real well. But that doesn't mean you have to do the same thing when you explain this to your board or to whatever audience is. Okay, simple, easy to understand. So this is just an example of when I was at Pajaro Valley Unified some years ago, and I've taken the numbers and put them into 18, 19, 19, 20, and so these are of course large numbers. They're in the millions because it was a large district at the time, but the same thing applies. It's just zeros behind the number. So even if you have smaller budgets, display your figures in just very easy to understand terminology. Most of the time when I look at budget presentations that come from CBOs or superintendents in other districts, way too much information is provided on the slide, and way too many facts and figures. You can be just simple. Your graphic and your text should match what it is, the message that you want to leave with. And it is entirely okay as a leader when you present first interim budget reductions, whatever that might be. It's entirely okay, and it's actually expected of you to advocate and have a message. There's nothing wrong with that. So you want to focus on what it is you want to accomplish in your presentation to your budget, whether that's adoption, buy-in, whatever that might be. You want to match your presentation to that. Unfortunately, we just sort of stuff as much as we can into the presentation, thinking that our board or that audience needs to know everything. No, they don't. They need to know what they need to know in order to take the particular action.
And then some of you might even know this, and you obviously have to cater to your board, because some board members want a ton of information, whereas others don't. And while your board members are one of your audiences, you don't want to get too in the weeds and confuse folks, because the audience is listening in on this or at your meetings or hearing it. They then start to get super confused. So just knowing your audiences, and if it's that one board member, trying to have if you're the soup, meeting with that person in advance and trying to walk them through it, but keeping it so that way the questions aren't coming out at the board meeting, but just trying to keep it, as Brett said, keep it simple, keep it high level. They can ask questions and follow-up questions, but I think we're so close to it, and the tendency is like we want to throw everything in the kitchen sink in there, and that's not what you don't want to do, which kind of goes into this is why do good communicators typically communicate in threes? And I would say that the number one reason is because most individuals can only process 3 things at a time. I mean, think about conversations you might have at a grocery store, or out, with family or friends. They could go on, but after a period of time, you start tuning out. So most people can only process things in threes. The other thing too is I'm always having the media mindset in my head. Is when I'm talking to media, if I give them too much, and they're listening, the last couple things that I'm talking about, they might put that in there when my most important things were up at top. So I always think, what are the 3 most important things I want to get out there? So that's another reason why you want to think in threes, is that especially if you're doing media interviews and so forth, they're only going to take 1 or 2 pieces of what you say, even though we might tell them 10, 15, 20 good tidbits info. So you definitely want to keep it short. And then the last thing too is it forces us to prioritize what our main points are. It forces us to prioritize, okay, yes, I have this big budget, I need to make cuts, but why am I really doing this? So it's forcing you to think about what are those reasons why you're doing these cuts, and then it'll help you develop what your message is. You want to jump in on anything, Brett, or add to?
Yeah, and I would say the last thing is it also helps to focus your leadership. It'll make you, if you're all over the map when you're trying to explain why you're doing something, and you're not clear, and start saying, we're doing this for the following 3 reasons, 1, 2, 3, and leave it at that. You're going to look like you're more in control, you have your handle on things, and even though it's a tough situation, you're the calm, cool captain in the storm, and you're going to see your ship through that on that. Even the presentation we were watching last night, for instance, there was a lot going on that, and I think if they would have sort of got it into 3 salient points and just left it at that, they would have been better off. As my mentor, once said to me, my first superintendent that I worked for, it says, give a board what they need to know. But that's a there's sort of that's a fine line, and it's more of a feeling, not a science. So you got to figure out what that is for your board, but you have to direct them and facilitate them accordingly.
So earlier I told you about that example of a board member, my friend, texting me asking me for talking points. So she's like, they're making all these cuts, and so I was texting her. I'm like, really quick on the phone, and these are some of the things I was texting her. But first and foremost, I told her, I'm like, you're not alone. You're not the only district that's facing declining enrollment. Probably half, if not 3/4 of the districts in the state. And I didn't put that on here, but that was one of them, that we're not alone in this. All districts are facing this. These are some other examples. I saw this article and I texted through this really quick. School districts across California, the potential loss of 1,400 per student or more as of Tuesday. And then some of the other stuff that I texted her was, this will be unlike anything California's public education system has ever faced. The last one was, this could be the worst recession since the Great Depression. And this was stuff that I was just doing on the fly because I had been reading articles this week, and these were things that I was seeing. So as you can see here, it doesn't get into the nitty gritty right off the bat. It's high level talking points. And if you think about it, when you think about who most of our public is, they're really getting their news off like Twitter and like Instagram, and just like quick tidbits from, high level from, the tidbits from like New York Times, CNN, and it's quick, fast little points. Sometimes they don't take the time to go read deep. So then they're going off spouting these like one-liners. So that's why it's so important to like come up with some of these quick, fast talking points, because if you're able to set the tone and get people thinking about this, then when you get to the point of having to make big decisions, whether it's cuts, furloughs, the whole thing, you will have set the stage with a lot of this information that's not just pertinent to your district. I will also add on, like, prior to COVID, we were in impasse, and we were looking to, our, union was pressing us to give them, a 7, 6, and 5 over the next 3 years. And so we were collecting all these articles from other districts that had to make cuts. And then I was writing those in letters to staff, like we're doing this compilation, like we're not alone. So if I find that email, I was trying to get it last night so I can give it to you all as a resource, but I can send it to Corey and she can send it to you. It was this document that I've been saving from February of all these districts that were having these issues. So you can show your audience that it's not just you, that we're all in this. And so it just helps like soften the blow, if you will. Did you want to jump in, Brett?
No.
Okay, so we told you earlier at the very beginning, one tool that we can leave you with is this, and we use this a lot, and it's a 4-step process. If you get stuck, like, what is it that I want to say? And that's why we want to keep it easy. And so this is like, my message will target, like, who am I trying to reach? Is it my staff? Is it my, community leaders? Is it my parents? Is it my, classified staff? And what do I want to help them understand? I want to help them understand X, Y, or Z. And then what do I need to tell them to help them understand X, Y, or Z? And at the end, what do you want to result in? So usually I start backwards on this when you use this tool, and it's like, okay, I need to cut 5 billion as my result, right? I want to cut 5 billion, not 5 billion, 5 million with little to no controversy. So what do I need to do to inform people? So like I said earlier, just doing your research, grabbing, statistics, and so you can use that to your advantage when you're developing what you want to present to them, and then help them understand that your district's not alone. We're not the only ones facing it. We have to cut X amount in order to get to, to be fiscally solvent. And then again, who's your target? So a lot of times you can develop your message, and then it could be 1, 2, 3, 4 messages, and you just repurpose it. You might have to tweak a word or two here, whether it's staff, parents, or kids, or community leaders. But this tool is a really good roadmap to help you if you're stuck. And again, not letting perfect stand in the way of good or good enough. It's better to say something than nothing at all. So that way, when you do get to a board meeting, like my friend did last night, she didn't have anything to say, and that wasn't on her. It was more on the district. The district needs to help their board members with talking points, so their board members aren't get hit hard with it. Did you want to?
So this is actually. Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, I said, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, and so folks on the line and participating, this is the part of the webinar where we're entering sort of the practical things. So this piece that Marci developed, we've been using this for a number of years, and actually it's a brilliant, simple, brilliant thing that she's developed. Gentlemen, did you see how I gave her a compliment in the middle of the webinar? Pretty smooth, huh? Not bad. What do you think, babe? Huh? It's not a marriage, it's an adventure. All right, back to the webinar. So this piece here, you can use for almost any type of dialogue or any communication you have. And I actually have, cut this out and I paste it, on my tack board in my office. And I utilize this in every single, either small interpersonal communications or large scale presentations to a particular audience. And I think the one thing we forget to do as leaders is we forget to prepare. We launch into a board meeting, we launch into negotiations, we launch into a discussion with somebody. But I'll use a sports analogy. Every great individual in sports, wherever that sport may be, they practice, they prepare, they have a little game plan. They're getting up the plate, they got some things they've run through in their head in terms of getting mentally ready for that. You can do this as well. And this is a simple thing. It takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes before you go and have that chat. Here's the roadmap. And as Marci mentioned out, you provide answers to these 4 things. You're gonna have a roadmap by which then you can engage in that communication, large scale, small scale, whatever that is. And you're gonna have something that you can follow along with and not look like you're all over the map. This is probably one of the best preparation roadmaps for any type of leadership communication that I've seen in my career. Well done, Marci.
Thank you. And then I'll say this, the issue might be negative and you're like, oh, how am I going to twist this or, make it, make some selling points on it. So for example, the media called us the other day, when the governor said, oh, school's going to start in July. And you're like, oh God, why do you say that? Right. So, cause it gets everyone all up in arms. So what I did was quickly thinking, okay, one, we have this on our side. What were my talking points? My talking points are we already start already in August, so we already start earlier enough. The second thing is I wanted to push out not just about early, but I wanted to push out the fact that, okay, we're going to support those kids in greatest need. So I really moved them instead of like school starting in July, August. I moved them to what kind of supports are we going to offer during our expanded school year and how we want to reach out to our most vulnerable population. So while I answered their question that no, we're not going to change our start date, I was able to talk about the positives and how we were going to like shore up some of those kids that needed the most support. So no matter what the issue and what you get asked, even if it's a media or someone, think about what are some positive things that the district's already doing and how can we weave that into our messaging. I do that all the time. I don't necessarily answer the question. I mean, I answer the question, but then I also think about what is 1 or 2 things I can put in there that we're doing positively. And I can tell you, it's so great because they're looking for fodder and they will put that stuff in there. So, okay. Before we go in here, do we want to pause, Brett, or do you want to go through the next 3 slides, kind of giving them some big overview and then answer some questions? What should we do?
We can see if Corey, if you have any questions, but we will have a section at the end. Our timing's pretty good here. We will have about 15 minutes or so for questions. And then to folks in the participating at the end of the presentation, there's where you can contact us, and we're more than happy to help you out with that.
The only question we've gotten so far is somebody did ask if they could get a copy of the presentation, I think where the slides are a little bit bigger, because they'd like to be able to see some more of the examples a little bit more clearly. So if you can send me that at the end, I can send it out to everybody who registered. But at this time, that's the only question I've got.
Okay, and it's in that PowerPoint that I saved as a PDF, they might be able to see it bigger. And if not, I think Brett was going to link to some of those examples like that budget document. But yes, we can definitely do that. Okay.
Corey, why don't you just go tell them the glasses too?
Oh, like these, right here.
Yeah.
I can't see either. It's so bad. It's horrible. Okay.
Okay.
So
you want me to do this one? Or?
Yeah, then now, and I can jump in. Go for it.
Yeah, actually, you take lead on it.
Okay. So basically, now, what should you be doing now? And you might think, gosh, we already we should be already doing our 2021 budget, but I will tell you, since COVID, whether this is good, bad, or not, our cabinet team, we meet every morning, like on this 8:30 call, and I've never met in a cabinet so often, but it's actually been great because the last 2 weeks have been really, really good. And we've been starting to strategize about what does our budget look like? What are we doing? So I would highly recommend, if you're not already doing it already, start meeting and start talking about, like, what do we need to do to be, 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out? Because those are the hard questions you're going to have to answer, and you're going to have to start strategizing about it now. And the most important reason why you want to do that, especially for someone like me, is I want to start helping our people message what is that and why do we have to do that. So I think it's just so important to, one, start beginning to strategize that, and then start kind of developing what those communication or key talking points are going to be around that, and do it in a way that's easily understandable.
I think, Marci, I think right now, this is the time where we want to be, sowing, what is it? Plowing the field, preparing the field. I'm not a field gardener person, so I got to come up with a better analogy than that. But
Plowing the soil, tilling the soil.
Yeah, that's good. So we want to be actually sort of, laying the groundwork now. And so, the one thing too is as superintendents, CBOs, and others on the line as leaders, we have to remember something. We're often hit with the information first. And I don't know if you're like me, but about 3 weeks ago, I realized, you know what? When we come back next year, it's not going to look like anything the same, and it's not going to be anywhere near that. And I have to say, for me, I was in a real pissy mood, for a while there, to try to, wrap my arms around this new reality that we're facing. Well, so I was afforded the chance to process that. As you begin to communicate what may or may not happen next year, build in some time that your site leaders, your stakeholders and others, your staff, even your board, can accept the information, bring it in, and deal with it and process it a little bit. If you just hit them with a ton of bricks and then you expect decision making right then and there on that same night or that same moment, it's not going to be good. You got to afford your people the time to process these realities, particularly given the broader stresses that we're all undergoing right now. And so this May and June is a time for you to lay your groundwork down, to get them prepped for what may or may not hit them next year. This webinar is in the framework of preparing a budget and communicating your budget and your fiscal information, but you would be doing that for your other things as well. So you definitely want to lay the groundwork with your board and your stakeholders and community that be ready for sizable reductions and rollbacks coming into next year. And you want to sort of display that in easy to understand terms. And then, as we've left you here, 3 specific things, as well as then a roadmap by which you want to communicate those 3 things that you want to do. So that's where we are so far.
And then, one of the things it says engaging stakeholders in the process, and Brett said also, don't, we've had time to process this, but don't like hit your board over the head with it. And that's exactly what I saw last night. Because if you want your board to be behind you, especially if you have to make some tough decisions. And this was so sad. She was a young board member and she was like going, this is so hard. I don't know what to do. If you have board members that are going to flip-flop or not sure, you want to provide talking points for them because you want to help them get there too. So engaging them in the process, helping them before they even get to that board meeting to do that. The other thing that we're doing, as Brett said, so we have a special board retreat coming up in 2 weeks, and our board, it was going to be on something else prior to COVID, but they asked, let's change it, and can we talk about what the budget's going to look like, what we need to be doing to, for next year, and what we're going to be having to look at, for year 2 and 3 out. And some of it might be with, because our district's declining enrollment, and we stand to lose almost like, 200 to 300 kids off the bat. And so one of those things is like, we might have to consolidate schools. So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. So it's like getting your board as one of the stakeholder groups early, and doing a retreat, or holding like a special town hall or what have you, just so you can get people bought in and engaged in the process. Okay.
So checklist 2, this is what we suggest: June through into July, and you fill these out. They don't have to be in their exact same month. This is up to you. You're great leaders. You guys can figure this out. But this is the part where you're going to complete your 2021 budget as best you can. And we're going to realize, listen, this is not going to be a real budget. Okay, we're not going to have all the information that we would normally have coming out of our May revise. Also, it's not going to be connected. We're not going to have to connect it to an LCAP because the LCAP has been delayed. You'll note the 4th bullet there where I said, careful about your LCAP extension. Your budget is going at some point in time going to have to be matched with your LCAP goals. So keep those in line. You don't physically have to show that, physically have to do that this time around, but be mindful of that you will be able to, if this LCAP extension is truly in December, which I don't believe we're still going to have enough time and knowledge to do an LCAP in December, but be ready that you're going to have to make those connections. One other thing, the second check there is run your multi-year scenarios. Now, you want to check this off of FCMAT and CASBO because I'm not in alignment with them. FCMAT and CASBO have basically said, hey, start running your fiscal scenarios, run 3 or 4 different fiscal scenarios, and start running them off of your second interim data. Personally, myself, and again, this is just Brett talking, okay? If those of you who know me know I'm go off a little half-cocked, but I don't see the value of that. If you're just about a few weeks away from you developing your July 1 budget adoptions, you're going to have that data anyway. Why not run your multi-year off of the July 1 to see what might happen, your multi-year scenarios, I mean. And I laid out some sort of options there: flat funding, 5% reduction, 10% reduction, and a 15% drop in revenues in 2021. Just rough figures, just kind of see what your fiscal picture could look like if this is a scenario that's lands in our lap in August or September or sometime like that. You can certainly run your scenarios off the second interim if you want to. I'm not doing it here in this district because I just don't think it's worthwhile to do it. It's not going to paint a real picture. But FCMAT or CASBO or others might disagree with me on that. And then this is where, as Marci's been laying out, the third thing: engagement and buy-in. As you get into June and July, and you may have to bring some of your stakeholders back through this, because there's going to be no rest for the wicked. Okay, I can tell you, for me, I sort of use the analogy of a ship or a sailboat. Many of you know that's one of my passions is sailing. So I got a leak in my sailboat right now. I'm trying to get it to port so I can fix it and retool it for the next journey, which I don't know exactly what that's going to be next fall. So this is the part where Marci laid out, study sessions with your board, community webinars, definitely share information with your stakeholders, your teachers, your unions. So that they feel that they're being provided information, they're being brought in. Yeah, I know that can be a pain in the butt sometimes to do that, especially if you really don't like them. But trust me, you're going to need to do that to be able to get through this and be able to be poised to take uncertain actions with very limited amount of time to prep for those actions going into the next year.
And then I don't know, I'm assuming many of you on the call are obviously coming from smaller school districts. Brett does this, and ours is sort of medium-sized district, if you will, but we're on the small side, but we live in a community that has small community newspaper. Use that to your advantage. Write an op-ed, write letter to the editor. And I'm trying to think, I might have a couple samples that we did a couple years ago when we were facing this, and also actually recently when we almost reached impasse, or when we did finally reach impasse. But use that to your advantage, not in a combative way, but just a factual piece so the community knows what's going on. These small papers are always looking for information, and you're one of the key community leaders in your community. So I know they would welcome an op-ed piece from you.
Okay, so this is checklist number 3, and these are items that you should consider doing, and this would be August into fall in that time frame. So Plan for the uncertain. The only certainty we know is that we are walking into the most uncertain situation we've ever faced. And so you're going to need to communicate and convince your stakeholders that of that uncertainty, and that there's just so much that we don't know. You're going to prepare, and you're going to have to make them understand the possibilities of mid-year reductions. Now, remember, we're educators. We're an education system. We don't handle change real well. Okay, we're still on the same schedule when we were an agrarian society. Yeah, from 100, 150 years ago. So clearly we like our routine, and I would say a fair part of educators got into the gig because there was a high level of certainty. They could count on certain things, and that's all going to hell in a handbasket. So this is where you're going to have to be mindful of communicating to them, and as well as when you communicate to them, how you communicate to them, and then give them the time to process that reality. Okay, don't just throw it in their lap and expect them to make decisions. They need some time. And then we're also we're gonna have to start a school year, and whether that's quasi distance learning with staggered schedules and only some of our kids showing up on certain days, and whatever that is going to be, we're gonna have to do that whole back to school thing. So, and we're going to have to engage in what we'll call quote unquote normal school operations, whatever that's going to be next year. But, there will be kids coming back on the first day of school, and you're going to stand out in front and shake hands. Well, I'm not going to shake hands anymore. You're going to give, air high five 6 feet away. But you're going to have to engage in all of this reality, which is going to be hard. It's going to be depressing. It's going to be potentially contentious. All the while, we're going to have to do our school leader thing and be positive, upbeat, instill good morale, create a sense of hope, and such. So these are some of the challenges that we're going to have as we go into this.
And so Brett was saying about, just engaging in the normal. I was going to share this next slide about people before process and just using creativity and innovation. So this next slide is something that our ed services team has done. I know you all are on the business side, and this is a business budget workshop, but these
actually it's superintendents and ed leaders, a whole bunch. Yeah.
Okay. So
remember,
anyways,
we're small. We don't have all the staff you do. We got to do everything.
So this is really good. I mean, you can even steal without guilt some of this stuff, but about, we were talking about people before process, but these are themes that we've been using for our distance learning when we rolled it out. And what I love about it is this whole is care is more important than content, because I know staff, for example, is feeling overwhelmed, parents are feeling overwhelmed, students are feeling overwhelmed. So we've been emphasizing that care is more important than content. Yeah, push out your content, but if people are struggling, the care and the social emotional support that we offer students is key. So I just provide these as some sample just points for use, especially as you start back the school year, and you feel free to take some of this or use it or weave it into some of your messaging. The next thing we wanted to leave you with is, I mentioned or referred before that my school district, Monterey, back in, I think it was 3 years ago, we had to cut $5 million. So I put this together because I had to present to the Public Relations Association. I put this together, and it's all a Google Share Drive. And the first thing in this, I'm just going to show you, I won't go through all of it, is a PowerPoint. And it's, if you want to go through, it's our case study of what our challenge was, how we engage stakeholders, how we shape the narrative, our tools and tactics, and then rising to the challenge. So I won't take time because I want to save question time for you all, but that is in this drive, as well as Brett showed you some samples and stuff, how to do PowerPoints that are super easy. So I'm just going to scroll through there. So you see his PowerPoints, super clean, not a lot of numbers. So these are in here too for you. Here, where does our money go? So this link right here will take you to this drive that has all of these documents, and also has my staff survey, our community survey results. It has messaging, FAQs when we were trying to cut $5 million. So I just, we wanted to present that to you as a resource, but if you have questions, because it was our district, feel free to ask me, reach out, and what have you. But we thought that would be a good resource for you all.
So Marcy, when you and I worked together in Monterey for those couple years, was that the highlight so far of your career? Would you say that?
You know, I would have to say, yeah, Brett, that was a highlight.
I'm gonna pay for this when I come home tonight. All right.
All right. So anyway, so that's what we had just like as a presentation point. I know we kind of go through it fast, but we just want to open ourselves up for any questions you might have. And then our information's here, just if you want to reach out to us for anything. I know in previous SSDA stuff, I've had leaders reach out for key talking points on like issues that came up in their district. Tim has reached out. So Corey, take it away with any questions.
Before we do that though, let's do a quick summary if we can. So to folks that are participating in this, we've left you, if you've noticed, 3 handy things that you can do now when explaining and presenting your budgets and your fiscal information. Number 1, we left you the power of 3 and in preparing for that. Number 2, we gave you a roadmap to prepare for your messages and how you want to communicate. And then number 3, we left you a series of what we'll call checklists or suggested actions that you can take now from now until say September or so. Now again, these are subject to change and stuff, but hopefully you got two tools that you can use for almost any type of communication, and then now sort of a checklist of, okay, when it comes to presenting my budgets and explaining my budgets to various audiences, here's a checklist, and I've got 2 critical tools by which to construct my communications and my arguments. And if I leave you one last thing is we're leaders, okay? It's okay to advocate. It's okay to have a game plan, and it's certainly okay to have an agenda to push that. So Corey, we'll take it away for any questions.
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. Sounds good. So let's see, one of the first questions we have is, generally speaking, small school districts have significant reserves, which the finance department has pointed out this week. Is the key to use your reserves before laying off staff, since reserves are for rainy days and this is a torrential storm?
That's a wonderful question. So some of you may have heard me say this. Okay, there's such a thing as too large a reserve, and of course there's certainly such a thing as too small a reserve. First, start with this. Look at your reserve as not a numeric figure. Your reserve is 3 things, okay? Your reserve is the ability to do 3 things. Number 1, time to react. Number 2, time to plan. And number 3, time to implement. React, plan, implement, those 3 things. So drawing your reserve down to your 4% minimum or a 3% minimum, whatever type of district you are, you need to realize that may only be 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of payroll with that, and that's what you need to explain it to your stakeholders as such. So you'll have to find that sweet spot of that reserve that you need to be comfortable with over the period of time. Second thing is think about your cash, your available cash as well. You'll need sufficient cash in order to make monthly payroll and other things that are out there. So, it's going to be a discussion that you're going to have with your stakeholders, and it's going to be a discussion you're certainly going to have with your board, that maybe you're going to use an element of reserves to try to protect certain core programs that you want to protect, as well as implementing reductions. Word in my district, and I'm happy if whoever that is, if you want to contact me and I can give you more detailed answers. We're doing a combination of both, doing both certificated layoffs this year and classified layoffs this year, not because of COVID-19, but actually we had an anticipated budget problem in a couple years. We're doing that as well as utilizing some reserves, element of reserve to get through that. So it's not a clean answer, but those are some perspectives to think about.
Great. And then another question we have is, school boards will not be used to deficit spending. How do you communicate to them that deficit spending in the short run is the purpose of a reserve?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think you start early, start now with them. So if you have a conservative board that just, we don't deficit spend, you'll have to say, listen, this is a reason why you have reserves. is for tough times like this. And this is not about what is a higher value. What is it? Positive spending higher value than protecting core instructional program. If you can demonstrate for them easily on paper that, okay, you can engage in some deficit spending to get through this storm and protect your core services, because make no doubt, we're going to probably go down to the bone next year. I hope I'm wrong, but I've been at this long enough that I can kind of see this stuff in 3D, and it's not a good picture. So you'll have to communicate to them that, okay, some deficit spending for a period of time is okay, and this is because we have sufficient reserves to get through this and protect our cash flow and protect our core programs. But and then you know what? Also, I want to leave you with this too. It may come to a point too that your board's going to do what your board's going to do. One of my mentors, he's since retired, Dr. Ruben Ingram, a former superintendent and executive director of a group called SEAC, said to me once, whether you like it or not, your board has the statutory authority to royally screw up your district. And what we're meaning by that is that they have the statutory authority to make bad decisions as much as you inform them and such like that. They may not have the moral or ethical right to make those bad decisions, but they do have the right to make bad decisions. So if they're insistent upon that, and they're not going to get off something like that, well, then you're going to have to be, at the end of the day, you serve at their will, you're going to have to implement that, that particular public policy. I don't see that often. Usually if you start early and you're clear and you're concise, majority of times I see a board will come around, but you'll need to be prepared for that.
Right. And then kind of in relation to what you were just talking about, somebody asked, what about small districts that do not have a large reserve? Say a district that maybe just came out of financial issues about 2 years ago.
I would say, look to like a document like EdJoin. That's what I would say. I'm kidding. Okay, if you're coming out of a tough financial situation, then that discussion is going to be different. You're going to need to lay out, you're going to need a minimum reserve in order to protect your cash flow, as well as being able to keep your district, alive and solvent. And that's where the discussion is going to go, and saying, hey, we're going to have to maintain this level of reserve for cash flow purposes, so that we can keep the lights on. And we're going to have to look harder at programmatic or staff reductions to do that. And that's just, the financial reality of which we're in right now.
Great. And then last question I have right now is, do you believe we'll be allowed to have August layoffs or staff reductions if the COLA is below 2%?
I don't know. We entered a situation like that during the recession, and right at the last minute, the mothership unions were able to, get to the governor and legislature at that time, and they put a stop to it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did the same thing. We'll have to see.
Right. Well, let's see. I don't have any other questions right now. So if you two want to wrap it up, anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye to everybody?
Marci, you want to share, just how, our mentors have helped us out, and, kind of our philosophy on helping others?
Yeah, absolutely. Just know, I know that many of you are small school districts and you don't have the resources or the wherewithal to have manpower to help you create some of this stuff, or even just to be a sounding board. So please, you see my email on my phone there. You can text me anytime or email me. Text lately is easier because while I like to respond to emails since COVID, I don't understand how you get this many emails, but anyway, like you, they're all dumping in. So call or text, hey, I want to run something by you, or hey, can you help me with this, or hey, do you have a sample of that? People have helped us in our career, and my whole thing is steal without guilt. If I have something, I am more than willing to share it with you. So please reach out.
Yeah, and I really encourage the audience to look at that. I'm certainly, my area of expertise is operations and finance, and I'm certainly more than happy, to discuss like strategy and look at, look at your budget figures and stuff. But Marci has this plethora of talking points and examples and press releases on almost any single issue. It's so bad right now that my principals actually, they don't even come to me anymore. They go straight to Marci and say, hey, I got a cat stuck in the tree. You got a message for that. And she's got just this incredible quiver of resources and argument and statements that can be used. And so I'll often see my principals issue something, that after they've informed me of something, and I can recognize the text because it's come from Marci. So she's been our de facto communications officer, but we don't pay her.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you both, Brett and Marci, so very much for doing this webinar for us. We truly appreciate it. To everyone online, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar once that's completed, probably tomorrow morning, along with a survey, because we do love to hear how you enjoyed it. And we're always looking for ways that we can improve our webinars and also come up with other topics to give you guys. And we will be coming out with our May webinar schedule, hopefully tomorrow, if not early next week. Thank you all so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
See you tonight, babe.